Hey guys, so this movie I'm going to be reviewing Glen and Glenda. Now I know this is considered one of the worst movies of all time, but I'm not sure exactly if it's because of the fact that the main character is a cross-dresser or if it's because of the quality. So, I mean, it's not the best. It does have flaws, but I wouldn't say it's the worst movies of all time. Definitely not. Just get started with like the story, and it's a pretty simple story. It's not complex or anything. So it starts out with Bela Lugosi kind of setting the scene, and he starts telling this story. He's called the scientist in this movie, and he pretty much does nothing but just kind of set the scene at the beginning, and he appears later in the movie but doesn't talk. And so he starts telling the story. There's this man. A man is found dead from suicide. He's found in women's clothing, and he leaves this rather heartbreaking suicide note.
The records will tell the story. I was put in jail recently. Why? Because I, a man, was caught on the street wearing women's clothing. This was my fourth arrest for the same act. In life, I must continue wearing them. Therefore, it would only be a matter of time until my next arrest. This is the only way. Let my body rest in death forever in the things I cannot wear in life.
It also kind of reminded me of that Golden Girls episode with Sophia and her son.
The dress thing. Why didn't she stop the dress thing?
He's been doing that all his life. That didn't start with me.
Let go of the shame. So what if he was different? It's okay that you loved him.
I did love him. He was my son, my little boy. My baby is gone. Oh, Sophia.
So the detective, he's kind of curious about transvestism. How do you say that? So he goes and sees this doctor, and he starts talking to this doctor about transvestism. And the doctor starts telling this story about a man named Glen. Glen, he liked wearing women's clothing and had other aspects of, other female aspects he liked to do. He liked wearing his nails long, and, he wore wigs, and, dressed up. He wore heels. Not all the time, obviously, but he did like wearing women's clothing, and he feels ashamed for it. And so the doctor made sure to point out that Glen is not, in fact, a transvestite. He's not a homosexual. He's just transvestite. He just likes wearing women's clothing. And kind of that distinction kind of explained later in the video when I get more into it. But so we kind of get these like montage of people's thoughts, society's thoughts, so regular Joe's thoughts on transvestism.
Say, did you read about the guy that aims to a girl? Says he was perfectly normal, too.
How can a guy be normal and go and do a thing like that to himself?
All the same, it must take a lot of guts to pull a stunt like that.
That's a problem I don't ever intend to face.
Maybe it's a problem we should all face.
I don't get you.
Just think of the unhappy life. The miserable time this world of ours must have given that poor guy.
I still don't get you.
Now, here is a guy who wanted to be a girl. Supposing there had been no way to change.
You sound as if you're really head up on this thing.
I guess I am.
Do you realize what would happen if every man in the country that wanted to wear women's clothes or felt like a woman went to their doctors and wanted to change?
Of course. That's why I say perhaps society should be a little bit more lenient with them. Maybe society should try to understand them as human beings.
And so we continue on with the story about Glen. and he, you know, obviously he's torn, and he confides in a friend who wife left him when she caught him wearing her clothing, and he kind of after this has a nightmare, and you know, demons and devil and all this, his wife or his fiance demonizing him. So obviously he's, you know, feeling tortured about you know, about this, and he decides to eventually tell his fiance, and at first she is distressed, but she ultimately accepts him and gives him a woman's sweater, kind of as a way of accepting him. And so, and then after this, so kind of a happy story, after this transitions to this story about a transgender woman. She was born a man. She ultimately went to war when she was, I believe she was drafted. So she goes to war, and then she's hiding these tendencies to wear women's clothing and you know, more feminine aspects. And ultimately, when she gets out of the war, she has a sex change operation. And so she goes from being, her dead name was Alan, and then she, you know, her name is Anne, and so, and that's pretty much ends. It ends right there, and so, yeah, it's just, this movie is very shoddily put together, I guess, and it kind of, like I said, it's explained later when I kind of get into some of the backstory of this movie. But, I mean, yeah, it just feels cobbled together, and like I said, it's not too complex or anything. It was obviously just, I would say, kind of a public service announcement. It was more like an informative film about transvestism and sex, you know, transgenderism and sex change operations and stuff like that. What I do like about this movie is that it has, like, this message about, well, I wouldn't say, it does kind of paint transvestism into a positive light, and also has a fairly positive message on transgenderism. At least at the end of the sex change operation, they didn't demonize the transgender women. It was just more like informative than anything. Because, you know, the thing that pisses me off is how, you know, society more nowadays will demonize transgender women, transvestism, just anything that where men kind of show any feminine traits. I think it kind of stems from this, you know, hatred and fear of femininity. You know, if you are perceived to be feminine at all, then, you know, it's emasculating and all that shit, which irritates the fuck out of me. So that's why I like this movie. It doesn't do that. So that was pretty much the movie. And so going into a little bit of the backstory, it's actually pretty interesting. The making of the movie and why it was made is actually just as interesting as the movie itself. So this is actually inspired by a sex reassignment surgery of Christine Jorgensen. She made headlines in 1952 when she had a sex change operation. So the producer of this movie, George Wise, he wanted to make an exploitation movie about this sex change operation. No one wanted to take it, but Ed Wood was able to convince him to let him make the movie because he was a transvestite. Ed Wood, it's not you know, hidden or anything. He was well known for being transvestite. Ultimately, it was supposed to be a sex change operation movie, but he also made it about transvestism. The explanation for why Lugosi showed up in the film, I mean, you know, Ed and Lugosi had a kind of close relationship. I mean, I have the feeling that Ed Wood helped out Lugosi when he could by just putting him in his movies, because Lugosi, later on in life, he was poor and had, you know, addiction problems, you know, drug problems. So he was either paid either $1,000 or $5,000. It's up for debate. He also appears later in like Plan 9 from Outer Space. He also appears in that. So I feel like that Ed Wood helped out Lugosi whenever he could, because he knew he needed some help. But Dolores Fuller, she plays Glen's fiance in the movie, but she also happens to be Ed Wood's in real life girlfriend, which I thought was interesting. There's actually a book that's kind of a continuation of this movie, I guess. It's called Killer and Drag, and that book has a sequel called Death of a Transvestite. And while it's credited, you know, Ed Wood is credited as the author, it was probably made by the producer instead. He wanted to add extra scenes for the movie because he thought the movie was too short. And it was. I think it was like, I don't know, maybe an hour long. So fairly short. And of course, this is, you know, it was typical of the 1950s exploitation and grindhouse films. So, it's not really that surprising it was made. There are some deleted scenes of the movie, but I couldn't find them online. I know there's a VHS version that has it, but I don't know if you can find them online, because this is actually in Internet Archives, or you can just watch it for free on YouTube. But I'm not sure if there's any that had added the deleted scenes into the movie. For the part of the second part with Anne or Annie, that's what the second part is called. It uses stock footage to make the movie. So obviously, I don't think there was any added actors in that second part. They just used stock footage. And it was made to meet the distributor's demand for a sex change film. But to be honest, for the most part, it actually does fit well, because I think it kind of gets distinction between transgender and transvestite. Or at least that's how I saw it. There's this author, Danny Perry. He wrote a book, Cult Movies 3, and he had a thought on it that I actually do agree with. He says this is actually radical, if ineptly made film that presents a far more personal story than is contained in films by more well-respected, you know, artists. And I do agree with it. This feels very personal, and knowing that Ed Wood was transvestite, that bit about how Glen is a transvestite, not gay, I felt like that was just Ed Wood projecting that into the film. He wasn't actually gay, he was just a transvestite. So I do think it was a very personal movie for Ed Wood, which is why I appreciate this movie, and I did like that aspect about it. It felt very personal, whereas some other movies, it felt like the artists, they didn't really care about making the movies, even if they were well made. So I can respect that aspect of this movie, and I gotta check out this. David Lynch said this is one of his favorite films, and that actually kind of explains. That's like not surprising at all. And if you don't know, George Weiss, the producer of this movie, he also made another exploitation film the same exact year, Test Tube Babies. And I have that on my list to watch because that sounds amazing. And FYI, like I said before, Glen and Glenda and Test Tube Babies are actually available through our Internet Archives. because they're in the public domain. So if you want to watch either of them, just go watch it on Internet Archive. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the movie Glen or Glenda. And like I said, I don't think it's the worst movie of all time, and there are aspects I appreciate about it. And I know that some aspects of it are terrible. So yeah, I'm going to be doing a review of this movie as opposed to a reaction because I was having trouble with, you know, my camera. But I've actually been, I actually like doing it like a review as opposed to like reactions, simply for the fact that with a review I'm able to really just brew over what I've seen and kind of collect my thoughts on how I actually feel about the movie, and so I can just, you know, give you my full thoughts on the movie. That because when I do a reaction, it's hard for me to really think about what I really feel about the movie while I'm watching it, or even just a few minutes after. I really have to brew on the movie to try to figure out my feelings for it. So this is why I like doing reviews. So maybe leave your thoughts down in my comments whether or not you like me doing a review of a movie, or do you like me doing a reaction of a movie. Or maybe like if it's a big blockbuster action movies, if you'd like me to do a reaction on that. Whereas like some of these films, especially like the 1001 Movies Watch Before You Die, where, you know, they're more complex, you might want me to do a review because there might not be as many exciting scenes in it, but I can really just give you my full thoughts on the movie. So just leave it down in the comments of your thoughts. Other than that, yeah, you guys have a nice day. You guys stay safe out there. Stay cool, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.